Hey guys, Zomfox here, and it's time to do the second to last draft recap for the UFL's dispersal drafts. And we're going to look at the XFL dispersal draft recap for the San Antonio Brahmas. A lot of people have said this is the single worst draft any of the 8 teams had, so let's see if there's some merit to it. Now, the first guy to look at is Bryson Aline, and right off the bat, you'll see he's a former Roughneck, which, guess what? 18 of the 20 players the Brahmas drafted are from the Roughnecks. Wade decided to pretty much exclusively draft Roughnecks, but he didn't even draft what you would call his guys, and we'll get to that once we get to him. As for Bryson, he's a backup running back, a solid addition to a team. The Brahmas are currently without their number one running back from last year. Will he come back? I don't know. So, not really shocked they ended up getting a running back at this point. But Bryson, who was solid, 193 yards, 1 TD, very solid depth guy to have on a team. And then we get to the start of the questionable picks. When you look at Dioli, Ars Tilde, yeah, it starts to get pretty whack. You'll notice that a lot of these guys are players that Wade either got in a rookie draft or letters of intent signings this offseason. This is the start of him. Yes, he is a wide receiver. He can be a good weapon, but we've never seen him play in spring football. Some guys transition well, some don't. And considering how many of these type of guys Wade got, it's no shock that people don't like this draft. Now, one that isn't one of those is Devontae Beckett. Really solid linebacker this past season. He was tied for 7th in interceptions and actually was second in total tackles with 63. And he had 2 interceptions, half a sack, 3 TFLs. Really solid linebacker. He wasn't the star of this defense, as this defense had a couple other really, really good players. But he was a very underappreciated piece of a really solid unit. Definitely going to be a great guy to have as your leading tackler for this Brahmas team. Really solid addition. Then we have Amari Cobb, another linebacker. We've never seen him play in spring football. Another guy that has been bouncing around NFL teams and signed a letter of intent this past offseason and is now drafted by the Brahmas. Then Rashad Coward, the exact same thing. Bounced around in the NFL, offensive lineman. Always great to add O-lineman, but another guy we haven't actually seen play. Then Jalen Dalton, defensive tackle. Another guy we haven't watched in the XFL, bounced around the NFL, this time from the Dragons, believe it or not, and now is with the Brahmas. Then we have Austin Edwards. The same exact story, defensive tackle. So at this point, you can pretty much see why this draft has been unanimously viewed as the worst. Yes, it could age really well, but the fact is that the Brahmas pretty much didn't understand the point of this draft, which was to get the good players available to you that you know are good, rather than guys you think are good. Essentially, this is very, very evidently Wade Phillips wanting to get the guys that he wanted for the Roughnecks to the Brahmas without actually bringing much of the Roughnecks over, as he's only brought a few of them compared to how many guys that signed letters of intent. Now, we do get to the one really great pick, Cody Latimer. This was the only non-Roughneck that played in the XFL last season that he drafted in the dispersal draft. He was a good one, Cody Latimer. 50 receptions, was the 3rd most in the league. He had the 4th most receiving yards at 593, tied for 7th in receiving TDs at 4, and was an all-XFL tight end. And unlike a lot of other positions where they were much easier to get all XFL nods than all USFL nods, as there's like 2 centers, multiple other DBs and all that, tight end there was only 1, and Cody got that spot. He was clearly the best tight end in a league that did have Sal Cannella. So getting him to the Brahmas is a humongous add and is going to be a great asset to their quarterback. Going to be a solid one. Then Alex Millett. Yeah, Alex Millett actually was really great last year. That's my bad. I kind of mixed up with someone we'll get to later. But yeah, he was an all-XFL player this past season, a really, really great center. You know, he was one of the 2 all-XFL centers. That's what I meant when I was saying how it was a lot easier to be an all-XFL player than all-USFL player for something like that. So getting back your all-XFL center is a really great add. This was a solid pick. And then Jordan Mosley, another guy that actually did play for the Roughnecks last year. 39 tackles, 2 TFLs. Solid DB. Again, one of those type of guys that, much like a lot of the breakers I've talked about in the USFL side of things, on a really good defense like the Roughnecks, a lot of these solid players go very underappreciated when you have star power on them. So, solid add. Then we get Marvin Pierre, linebacker who has never played for the Roughnecks. Another one of these picks, pretty shocking how many of these guys there are. Wyatt Ray, defensive end for the Roughnecks, bounced around the NFL, now is here in San Antonio. We'll see how he does. Jalen Samuels, you might remember this guy from being on the Steelers. for about like 3 or 4 years back in the late 2010s, early 2020s. Bounced around a bit and now is here in San Antonio. Then we have Justin Smith, wide receiver. Really solid piece last year in the XFL. Very much one of those great tertiary threats. A guy that's not going to be your wide receiver one, but is going to thrive as that extra type of guy. Only 16 receptions, but he averaged 14.9 yards per each reception to get him to 238. This guy had 5 separate 20-yard receptions. That's the kind of guy you want in a team. Tease Tabor, defensive back who bounced around the NFL, now is in San Antonio. Kevin Tolliver, the exact same player. Then we have Teron Vincent, defensive tackle, who didn't bounce around, who was on one team this past offseason, signed on with the Roughnecks, and now it's the Brahmas. Cade Warner, the son of Kurt Warner, he is a wide receiver that is now on the Brahmas. Another guy was on the practice squad of the Buccaneers this past season and now is on the Brahmas. Then Nate Weiland is a very skeptical kind of pick. This is not like Tisdale, we were talking about in an earlier draft video, where he showed real promise in 2 games. This is a guy that in the 2 games he appeared in, got a few tackles, and that was pretty much it. If Wade is drafting him, that hopefully shows that Wade has a lot of faith in him. So he should be hopefully ready for a great year this next year, or else this was a waste of a pick. Then Quincy Wilson, defensive back. Another defensive back that came from the NFL, bounced around, and is here. And that's the last pick. So yeah, I'm going to be flat out honest. I agree with pretty much the consensus. I know I've had some takes that go against the grain. I think the Defenders had a good draft. I think the Showboats were just a really great, or the Panthers were a great flash draft. But the Brahmas really had an awful draft. The fact is, a lot of these guys would have been available as guys in the Super Dispersal draft, or better yet, just as free agents when it's all said and done, potentially. Yes, I know we saw a lot of other teams get a bunch of Roughnecks, but that's because the Roughnecks signed on this huge amount of guys from the letters of intent. So it's no shocker the Roughnecks had by far the most players selected, and especially when you have one team use 18 of their picks on them. That's the thing. If the Brahmas do not do well this upcoming season, it is going to be nothing due to the quarterback, nothing due to the coach during the season, and nothing during anything else. If they fail this upcoming season, it is entirely because of this dispersal draft. I cannot say that about any other team in the league. This is the only one where if they fail, it is entirely easy to point at a single point in time where their season went wrong, and it's when this draft happened. This was an insanely bold decision by Wade Phillips and the general managing group to just get a bunch of guys that haven't shown you anything in spring football. We don't know if these guys are going to be great. I mean, remember Robert Kimdichie? We all thought he was going to be the really great player on the Michigan Panthers. Turns out he doesn't even make the opening day roster, and Breland Speaks ends up being that guy. So we don't know for sure if any of these guys coming from the NFL are actually going to be good here. So it's a huge risk that Wade and his group are taking. I'd be interested to see how it goes, but I do agree this was definitely the worst dispersal draft of all 8 teams. So as always, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We just have the St. Louis Battlehawks left, which will come out later today. As always, have a great night.